Tony Abbott, welcome to breakfast.
Morning, Fran. Nice to be here.
Tony Abbott, did Peter Costello give you a call and tell you he was going to leave? Did he let you know, and what did he say?
Peter always played his cards very close to his chest, and I found out via, I think, a text message or an email just before Parliament sat yesterday.
What do you think about his decision to quit?
I'm disappointed because I'm always disappointed when giants leave the Parliament, and Peter Costello was a giant, no doubt about that. On the other hand, while I think it's a loss for our country, I think it will help Malcolm Turnbull's bid to become Prime Minister. That's a lot less complicated now than it might have been yesterday. And given my view of the importance of beating an inadequate government, I think it's good that now Malcolm Turnbull's got the best possible chance of winning.
And why do you think this gives Malcolm Turnbull a better chance? Just because it's impossible having a giant sitting on the back bench?
Because inevitably, every time Peter Costello opened his mouth, comparisons were made. Every time Malcolm took a position, people wondered whether there might have been a different position from someone else. That's just the unfortunate dynamics of politics, particularly when you've got a fairly feral media culture.
So is that the only difference, that it allows Malcolm Turnbull perhaps to focus forward rather than looking back over his shoulder? What about influence in the party room, perhaps the economic direction of the party?
I think the party room is basically full of people who are very economically sensible, and I don't think there are too many debates inside the party room about economics. There are lots of debates about politics, but that's always the way.
Well, there's been a lot. I know we're not sitting in the party room, and you'd know better than us, but there's a lot of commentary suggesting that Peter Costello has led, to some extent, a bit of a push against Malcolm Turnbull on some key issues. Emissions trading is one. That he has had an influence and helped galvanise perhaps the right of the party.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's a bit
Which is
overblown.
funny for a guy who was once nicknamed Lom, leader of the moderates.
Yeah, but again, you see, Peter was never quite the social progressive that he was painted when he was pitched in opposition to John Howard. Similarly, Malcolm Turnbull's not quite Wentworth man, as he is so often portrayed. I mean, I think that Peter Costello and Malcolm Turnbull are much more similar in their views across the board than people will often credit. Now
that he goes, he'll live perhaps with a disappointment, or perhaps he won't. Perhaps he's come to terms with it. But in the Howard years, I recall that you revealing that you'd reassured Peter Costello before the 2004 election that John Howard would stand down in that next term, and if he didn't, it would be made clear to him that it'd be in the interest of the party for him to hand over, and you'd basically look after it. Did you lead Peter Costello on?
Look, that's an old chapter which I have no particular desire to reopen. I always thought that Peter was self-evidently the only worthy successor to John Howard, and I wanted to do my best at all times to keep the best team at the head of the government, and part of that was trying to ensure that Peter was as happy as possible, given the inevitable disappointments and frustrations of being the deputy.
I think he feels like you let him on. Can we just go to today's news poll, which shows that the Liberal Party, the first party preference votes for the coalition, you're almost neck and neck now with the government. Do you see this as significant? Is this the gap closed in your view?
It's not the gap closed. One good poll does not a victory make, but certainly it's encouraging. I think that people are finally figuring out that Kevin Rudd, excuse me, is really making it up as he goes along. I mean, let's face it, once he was an old-fashioned Christian socialist, then he was never a socialist, then he was an economic conservative, now he reckons he's a social democrat. This guy has no deep convictions on economics, and I think people are starting to figure that out.
Okay, Tony Abbott, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Fran.
Liberal frontbencher Tony Abbott.